The city park was alive with the weekend buzz. Parents pushed strollers, joggers passed with headphones in their ears, and food carts filled the air with the smell of roasted peanuts and pretzels. Near the old stone fountain, tucked away in a quiet corner, sat a little girl with a violin that looked older than she was. Its varnish was chipped, the bow's horsehair frayed, but she held it as though it were a treasure worth more than gold. Her name was Emily. 10 years old, with brown curls that framed her pale face, and a pair of bright hazel eyes that betrayed both innocence and resilience. Her dress was faded from too many washes, and her shoes had holes in the soles, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. She placed an empty tin can before her, a handwritten sign taped to it. "For my brother's medicine. God bless you." The little girl took a deep breath and lifted the violin to her chin. She tightened her grip on the bow, trying to ignore the bustling noise around her. Her fingers trembled as they hovered over the strings, but she pressed down and began to play a simple tune her mother once taught her. The notes wavered, fragile like a butterfly's wings in the wind, struggling to be heard over the chatter of the crowd. Most people walked by without noticing. A few glanced, perhaps offering a sympathetic smile. Some tossed a few coins into her can, the metallic clinks punctuating the uneven rhythm of her music. A group of teenagers laughed as they passed, one of them mocking her, "Hey, play something from TikTok, kid." They didn't stop to listen. Still, Emily played on. Each note was a prayer, a small act of hope. She thought of her younger brother, Michael, who lay in bed at home coughing, his chest rattling with every breath. She thought of her mother, who used to hum lullabies while cooking, before sickness took her away. The violin was all Emily had left of her mother, and though her technique was unpolished, her heart poured through every note. As she continued, a sleek black car pulled up near the park entrance. A tall man stepped out, wearing an immaculate navy blue suit, shiny leather shoes, and a wristwatch that gleamed in the sunlight. His name was Richard Hale, a millionaire real estate developer, known in the city for his lavish lifestyle and sharp tongue. He was on his way to a dinner meeting but decided to take a short walk through the park. His eyes caught the sight of the little girl with the violin. He slowed his pace, curiosity flickering across his face. At first, he thought it was amusing, a child trying to play music in the middle of a noisy park. He stood a few feet away, arms crossed, and listened briefly. The violin squeaked, one note falling flat. He chuckled under his breath. Walking closer, Richard smirked and called out, loud enough for passers-by to hear, "Hey, little one. What are you trying to do with that violin? You think people want to hear that?" Emily's bow slipped slightly at the harshness in his tone. She looked up, her eyes wide but steady. "I'm playing, for my brother," she said softly. Richard raised an eyebrow, the corners of his lips curling into a mocking grin. "Your brother, huh? And what's this?" He pointed at the sign taped to her tin can. "Medicine. That's a pretty story. You sure you're not just hustling people?" A few bystanders stopped to watch. Some frowned at the man's words, others whispered quietly. Emily's cheeks flushed, but she held her violin tighter. "It's true," she whispered, almost pleading, "he's sick. I just want to help him." The millionaire let out a short laugh, the kind that carried arrogance rather than amusement. "Kid, if you can actually play something worth listening to, maybe I'll help you. In fact," he paused, smirking as he looked around at the small gathering crowd, "if you can impress me, I'll adopt you myself. How about that?" A ripple of laughter spread among a few onlookers. One man shook his head in disbelief, muttering, "Unbelievable." A woman gasped softly, clutching her daughter's hand closer. Emily felt the sting of humiliation burn in her chest. Adopt her? Was he making fun of her? Her mother had always told her to stand tall no matter what, to let her music speak when words failed. She closed her eyes briefly, remembering her mother's voice. "Emily, the violin isn't just an instrument. It's your heart. Play with it, and people will feel you, even if they don't understand." She lifted her bow again, her small hands trembling, but this time with determination rather than fear. "All right, sir," she said quietly, though her voice carried in the silence that had fallen over the circle of strangers. "I'll play." The park seemed to hold its breath. Even the birds perched on the fountain's edge fell still. Emily pressed the bow to the strings and began. At first, the sound was thin and shaky, but as she leaned into the melody, her posture changed. She swayed slightly, her eyes shut tight, as if she were somewhere else, somewhere safer, warmer. The notes grew stronger, weaving a melody filled with longing and hope. It wasn't a polished performance, but it was raw, honest, and achingly beautiful. The music rose and fell like a heartbeat, echoing across the park. It told the story of a little girl who had lost too much, too soon. The story of a brother she refused to give up on. The story of a mother's love that lived on through every note. Strangers around the fountain stopped in their tracks. A jogger pulled out his earbuds. A mother lifted her child so he could see the girl playing. Even a street vendor selling hot dogs leaned over his cart, entranced. The crowd grew silent, every ear tuned to the fragile, powerful music that seemed to come not from the violin, but from Emily's very soul. Richard Hale, the millionaire who had mocked her, stood frozen. The smug grin slipped from his face. His chest tightened as the melody swelled, piercing through the armor of pride he carried everywhere. For the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him. Something that his money, his cars, his mansions, had never awakened. When Emily finished, the last note hung in the air like a lingering prayer. The silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred. Then, slowly, applause broke out. One person clapped, then another, until the park echoed with the sound of hands coming together. Some clapped with tears in their eyes. Others cheered. A young man dropped a folded $20 bill into her tin, followed by several more generous offerings. Emily lowered her violin, cheeks flushed, chest heaving. And Richard Hale, the man who had mocked her, could not move. His arrogance had vanished. He was left standing there, utterly speechless, humbled by a little girl and her broken violin. For a long moment, the park remained wrapped in silence. Emily's last note seemed to linger in the cool evening air, as if the violin itself refused to let go of the music. The girl lowered her bow slowly, her arms trembling from both effort and nerves. She bit her lip, waiting for the man in the suit to laugh again, to say something cruel. But no such words came. Instead, a ripple of applause began from a woman near the fountain. She clapped softly, her eyes glistening with tears. Soon, the sound spread like wildfire. Hands came together, louder and louder, until the park roared with cheers. People whistled, shouted, and even rose to their feet as though they had just witnessed a miracle. Emily blinked, her hazel eyes wide with surprise. She had played before strangers. Many times, but never had she felt such warmth, such recognition. Coins and bills poured into her tin can. A jogger slipped a folded $50 note inside. A man in a business jacket crouched and placed a crisp $100 bill on top of the pile. "For your brother," he said softly, offering her a reassuring smile. The little girl's throat tightened. She whispered, thank you so much," her voice breaking as she hugged her violin close. Richard Hale, the millionaire who had mocked her, stood rooted to the ground. His polished shoes suddenly felt heavy, his expensive watch like a chain on his wrist. The mocking words he had thrown at her, "If you can really play something worth listening to, I'll adopt you," now echoed in his mind like a cruel taunt. He felt the sting of shame crawl up his neck. For years, Richard had believed that money was the only measure of worth. He had dismissed street performers, ignored the homeless, and treated anyone beneath his wealth as invisible. Yet here was a little girl with nothing but a broken violin who had just reached into his chest and stirred something he had buried long ago, his humanity. He stepped forward slowly, his usual confident stride replaced with hesitant steps. The crowd parted, curious to see what he would do. Emily looked up nervously, clutching her violin as though afraid he might snatch it away. Richard cleared his throat, his voice softer than anyone had ever heard it. Where did you learn to play like that?" Emily's lashes fluttered. She looked down at the violin, her small fingers brushing the worn wood lovingly. "My mama taught me," she whispered. Before she went to heaven. She said music can heal hearts. I promised her I'd never stop playing, no matter what." A hush fell over the crowd. A woman in the back covered her mouth, holding back tears. A man muttered, "God bless her." Richard swallowed hard, his throat tight. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to say. And your brother?" he asked quietly. Emily nodded, her eyes glistening. "He's sick. I play here to buy medicine for him. Sometimes people give enough, sometimes they don't." She looked down, ashamed. "But I try my best." The millionaire's chest ached. He remembered being a boy himself once, long before his riches, when his own mother used to sing him to sleep after his father left them. He remembered the loneliness, the hunger, the nights when music was the only comfort. Somewhere along the road of success, he had buried those memories under layers of arrogance. Now, standing before this little girl, it all came rushing back. Richard knelt down, lowering himself to her level. The sight shocked the crowd, a man of such wealth humbling himself before a street child. His voice cracked as he spoke. "Emily, I owe you an apology. I mocked you, and I was wrong. Your music, it's worth more than all the money I have. You don't need adoption. You need a chance to shine." Emily blinked at him, unsure if she could believe the change in his tone. A chance. He nodded firmly, emotion in his eyes. "From today, I'll sponsor your education. I'll pay for your brother's medical care. And I'll make sure you get real music lessons with the best teachers in the city. You shouldn't be out here struggling. You should be on a stage, Emily. You deserve the world to hear you." Gasps echoed through the crowd. A man clapped, murmuring, "That's how you use money right." Emily's lips trembled. She hugged her violin tightly to her chest, as if it were her mother's embrace. You'd really do that? For me and Michael?" Richard's eyes softened. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "I would. And not because of pity, but because your talent deserves it. You gave me something today. No one else has given me in years. You reminded me what it means to feel." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. She set her violin down carefully and, without thinking, threw her arms around the man's neck. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, her small voice breaking with relief. "Mama always said kindness is the richest gift." The crowd erupted into applause again, louder than before. Some people wiped their eyes. Others pulled out their phones, recording the moment that would later spread across social media, a millionaire humbled by the music of a little girl. Richard stood, holding Emily's hand as though she were his own daughter. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get your brother the help he needs." As they walked away together, Emily carrying her violin, the crowd continued to cheer. For once, the applause wasn't just for the music, but for the lesson the world had just witnessed. And in that moment, Richard Hale, the man who once believed wealth was everything, discovered the true measure of riches: compassion, humility, and the courage to lift others when they fall. Sparkle's moral: wealth measured in dollars fades, but wealth measured in kindness lasts forever.